Whether you're trying to get to your first push-up or trying to make sure you're using proper form when you do your push-ups, let's go ahead and jump in and talk about all things push-up mechanics.
For starters, one of the simplest ways that we'll just kind of break it up is your proper push-up form. Typically, we're just going to talk about the core being engaged. So just watching that there's some activation kind of at your belly by your rib cage, not arching your back or rounding your back too much. So just trying to keep this relatively flat. And then secondarily, again, very simple here, is going to be the angle your elbows are out. So we'll see a lot of times when people try to do it for the first time, they bow it out almost like it's a 90-degree angle here. But in reality, we probably want it somewhere between about 30, 45 degrees. If you go in a little bit more, it's going to use your triceps more. If you go out more, it just puts your shoulders in a bad position and can put a little bit extra stress on your shoulders than you want, as opposed to just from a strength standpoint. That's probably the easiest way to break down some of the either misconception of position or common things that you'll see just in the gym as someone just goes to do one.
And then we will also chat about different mechanics for different variations in a video that's coming up in a couple weeks. So go ahead and stay tuned for that if you are interested.
So some common things that we're looking at, going off the 2 points we just mentioned. One thing is the shoulder blade positioning. So you can see as the shoulder blades specifically can pop out, we're just looking at different things, whether it's them rounding this ways, and we see it's almost like your back is arching this ways instead of like in the lower back arching, which is pretty interesting when you see it for the first time. Sometimes people shrug their shoulders up a little bit higher this ways as well. That's another common thing where your neck muscles are trying to make up for some of the other shoulder stabilization muscles. You can just see some really weird stuff. Ideally, you see some shoulder blade motion, but to keep it simple, those are probably two of the more common things. As you're pushing away, you'd expect it to not come backwards like we saw a few seconds ago, or she'll demonstrate again. That would show that your scapular protractors or your serratus muscles aren't really engaging, and then the other one is just when it comes upwards, that's more that the upper trap is over firing, and those are just easy things that you can pinch. If you have a top-down view is very helpful, or just a buddy. And then the elbow angle, we kind of talked about a little bit before, but just to show again, once it comes out to definitely past here, it puts a lot more stress on your anterior shoulders, the front of your shoulders. Those structures just aren't made to have support like that. So unless it's something sport specific where you know that you'll need to be in that position, it's probably one you want to avoid. And either way, you probably want to decrease the weight a little bit if you can, if you have to do that, compared to, if you were to maybe use like a weighted push-up of some kind in the better position for your shoulder blades. And then, the closer in, we already talked about engaging the triceps. In another video, we'll show some more demonstration specific to trying to work out. And then the other thing we discussed was the back and the core positioning. So the two different ways that we'll see that this can be done incorrectly. Number one is when there's too much of an arch in your back. So you'll see that's when you're really just straining your low back. You're just not engaging the core, brings you this ways. So if you're arching your back this ways, you're just kind of using ligamentous stability a little bit more, and the back muscles are firing too much. So we want it fairly even. And then the other time, sometimes when it's really more associated with weakness in the chest, sometimes you'll see people round their back a little bit too much the other way, where they're just trying to swing their head down almost, and that's trying to do the actual pushing up as opposed to using the chest as well.
Also get like a kind of.
That's another way, really, to be honest, for weakness in the upper torso. It can really be either or. So it's just more about just trying to strive to keep it fairly flat from a line standpoint. There's a correction sometimes we'll use with people where we'll put like a foam roller on their low back, just to kind of keep that angle. But the problem with that is it might cause excess, where it's kind of encouraging to arch your back too much. So that's not necessarily the best thing to do for this.
And I like to cue ribs down, stomach tight, hips squeezed, and that'll typically help a little bit. And then also the corkscrewing the hands into the ground is a common cue, because that'll help engage your serratus. That'll help with the winging as well, if you do have any of that, but also help the core be engaged a little bit more.
And if you see from this view, when she talked about the corkscrew, it's almost like you're trying to make your elbow crease show this ways, but without moving your hands. So as you'll see, I'll come here, and as I'm coming down, I'm trying to almost go in this direction as I push. if that makes sense, as opposed to letting it blow out this ways, which will also help with that elbow angle from being too much of a right angle.
And so to work on all of these things, if you're noticing maybe your core stability is a little bit limited, you can start with some planks. You can do these in a kneeling position or a push-up position as well, on your elbows or on your hands, depending on if you want to make that more specific. So if you want to start with a plank position to work that core stability, if you're noticing something there, keeping, again, that back flat, still pushing your elbows into the ground to push away, and the hips kind of maintaining that line there. You can also modify on your knees if you need, or you can even go up onto your hands if you want to work a little bit more of that push-up specific position. And your shoulders, hips, and knees all are going to be in one line. You don't want the hips to pop back. So everything in one line, trying to work on those holds so you can then do the push-up. And then also you can work progressing that towards a kneeling push-up for the anti-extension work as well. Essentially is what this is doing, is making sure those hips don't drop down. And then if you are noticing some of that shoulder blade winging, you can always work your scapular stabilizers like your serratus. So for this one specifically, doing a serratus push-up, so just letting the shoulder blades come in and then pushing into the ground away. You're not bending the elbows at all, you're keeping them straight, and you can think about, again, corkscrewing, bringing that elbow crease forward. And then you can progress that to some clocks as well. So if you have a band around your hands, you can stand against a wall and you're pushing into the wall and going up, out, into down, and you have like a small looped band around your hands. That can really get your serratus and work on that stability. Then you can progress it to all fours, and then even a push-up position if you wanted to, or a kneeling push-up position probably would be better because that one is a tough exercise. And then you can also work your lower trap, which is basically coming from the shoulder blade down to the spine here, and that's really with that inferior angle of the scapula tipping. And basically you want to minimize the upper trap and keep space between your ears and your shoulders, and ideally you should be a little bit higher there to really feel it kind of down in this area. And this one's a great one to strengthen that lower trap. And more of these types of exercises are in my shoulder prehab program, so I'll go ahead and link that below if you are interested in some more exercises to work on that shoulder blade stability.
So if you are struggling with maintaining the proper form, repetitions are important to kind of retrain your neuromuscular system. So purposefully taking a step back from a push-up itself, just to make sure you have all these cues and setting your body up for success, can be very helpful. So you see Laura right now, just to kind of make sure she's keeping the flat back, engaging the corkscrew, preventing her shoulders from shrugging upwards. All the things we just discussed, we're kind of making it easier in two different ways. One is with the knees down, and secondly, the more you raise the surface your hands are on, the easier it is. So there's people that might even start with their hands on the wall, maybe it's starting on a kitchen countertop, and then kind of working your way down. Really, there's a lot of different ways to eat a Reese's here, is kind of my expression, but so you can try different ones to see what you're more comfortable with. You can even combine the two of the kneeling and the hands elevated or an incline push-up, and it really is just more about your personal preference. And then you obviously want to see if you can kind of translate it to the normal way that you are doing push-ups and make sure that those cues are consistent throughout.
And you can even go down in a push-up position and then put your knees down and come back up as well as you're progressing too. So that's another common variation that I like to use too. If you do want more exercises to work on your chest strength, go ahead and check out this band-only chest workout that I have here, and stay tuned for the push-up variation video coming soon.